Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's Wednesday Wisdom guest. This is Wednesday Wisdom number 100. But first, we want to give a shout out to our podcast sponsors. You've heard me say this before. These are all companies that I used as an athletic director. They're great companies. I have no problem recommending them to you. So don't hit that fast forward button. Stay with us for just the next 3 minutes. Listen to our sponsorship shout outs. Here we go. We want to thank our good friends at Gipper for their support of the podcast. Gipper is the official social media graphic solution for us. And if you go to Gipper.com, their team is going to help you to create world-class marketing content for your school's social media channel. It's going to help you celebrate your athletes, promote your teams, just like the other 3,000 athletic programs across the country that trust Gipper. It's professional graphic design made simple. Go to Gipper.com, mention the podcast, you'll get a nice discount. That's Gipper.com. We also want to say thanks to Huddle. Go to Huddle.com and change the way you see the game. I used Huddle as a football coach, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure our school was a Huddle school. And our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided that let them coach our kids up to their highest level. Go to Huddle.com. Join the 8 million users and turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to say thanks to Snap. Go to snapraise.com. Hands down, the best online fundraiser out there. If you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and got little, if any, return, go to snapraise.com. We used it at our school. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it. It works. They also have a suite of other platforms, Snap Manage, Snap Store, FanX, that you should check out. You'll find it all at snapraise.com. We'd like to thank Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more, but I will. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more support, more security, more customization. Go to hometownticketing.com. They'll help you make the best online ticketing solution. We also want to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards, all the teams, for all the events, or show off your school's Hall of Fame, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Their mission is to help you bring your school's legacy to life and celebrate your community and showcase your school's diverse history and your proudest moments. And their interactive touchscreen video consoles are a great way to do that. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check out all the ways that they can help you in your program. We'd also like to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo to see their scoreboards and their score tables in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. We use it for home games, of course, but we also use it for pep rallies, for signing ceremonies. Their products are tremendously versatile, and their customer service is just outstanding. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. Schedule that live web demo today. We'd also like to thank Home Campus, the official and exclusive high school information management program for us. It's also your one-stop platform for scheduling, for all the things that go into athletic eligibility and clearance, uploading forms, working with parents, tracking coaches, you name it. Go to homecampus.com. It's a platform that I used every single day as an athletic director. That's homecampus.com. And we want to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. At my school, we use surveys for just about everything: teachers, coaches, and parents, also student athletes. And if you go to athleticsurveys.com, they're going to create a custom survey that's going to connect you with the parents you already hear from, the complainers, the ones that want to gripe about everything, and they'll connect you with the 98% that love and support your program. And that's a tremendously valuable tool to have when you're talking with a frustrated parent or your principal or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. Let them help you take the pulse of your parents and your student athletes. That's athleticsurveys.com. Welcome back, everybody, to another segment of Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast. This is episode number 100 in our Wednesday Wisdom series, and I've got one of our favorites back. She's been with us since the very beginning, and I'm excited to hear what she has to share today. Our guest is Jen Siess. Regular listeners will recognize Jen, as I mentioned, as a longtime contributor. She has a tremendous background. She was a college athlete. She was a coach. She has her own coaching business, Mind to Define. You know, that in itself overqualifies her for this podcast. But in the last year or so, she's added a number of activities to her plate. She's become a podcast host herself, a very successful podcast. She's also I'm going to say a reporter, but that doesn't do it justice for the St. Louis professional soccer team. And she does a ton of other things too. Jen Siess, welcome back to Wednesday Wisdom.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to ring in 2024 with you.
Well, we're gonna have to do it virtually, but since I have partied with you and your husband, at least it was a lunch party. I know that you can bring it in that area.
That's
So,
right.
as always, we appreciate you spending time with us. I know you're incredibly busy. What do you have for our listeners to kick off 2024 and celebrate episode 100 of Wednesday Wisdom?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And thinking about the theme when you asked me to come back on, so thank you for that. I was kind of looking at some things right align. I think many times in our lives, like we'll have something happen, and something along the same thing happens, and something along the same theme happens, and pretty much since Thanksgiving, it's been kind of happening for a particular theme. So I decided to name it "The Power of Your Own Perspective and Style." And it was interesting. I have a meme that had popped up on, some social on my phone from Stephen Bartlett, who's a podcaster, and said, "Stop telling yourself you're not qualified, not worthy, or experienced enough. Growth happens when you start doing the things you're not qualified to do." And if anybody out there is like myself, who, wants to be 150% qualified before we even dip our toe into things like that, I think it's a great reminder that being qualified sometimes can simply mean nobody else has your own perspective or your own maybe style of doing things. And the few other things that kind of came out that showed the doubt of this that I currently have sometimes myself. I was at the U.S. Women's National Team player game in Texas against China, and their player gala, their ball where they give out player awards, and the ladies have a good party, and it was a whole lot of fun, not only being there and being a fan, but also watching it just being another team who's having like an end of the year celebration. But I got to talk to Naomi Girma, and she is a back, one of the fullbacks at the U.S. Women's National Team, who, despite their lack of performance and the team's lack of success in terms of outcomes, Naomi Girma for me was a standout player, and not a standout with flashiness, not a standout with anything that you would point a specific finger to, but it's just a standout in her overall solid style of play. And Jake, do you know that as I talked to her, she had said, I asked her at one point, "Do you feel like finally like you belong? Like you're like, I'm here." And she said, "No, I still pinch myself and I wonder how I got here." And it was a little bit of doubt, right? A little bit of, I don't know if I belong stepping alongside these veteran players, because she's rather new. And so, of course, I stepped in as we're all coaches, I think, forever. And I said, "Of course you belong here, and these are the reasons why." And it was fun to hear her respond. But, it reminded me of, I struggled with that myself this past year. You brought up the broadcasting. And it was something that I know the game of soccer, of course, I know pretty well. I don't probably consider myself to know it as well as the main color analyst, but I was asked to step in a couple of times when he was unavailable. Scared to death. Couldn't probably talk about the game in the way Dale could, but so I talked about it in the way I knew. And the great feedback that I got, along with constructive criticism, was the fact that there were some listeners that were like, she put it in a different way that I hadn't thought about it before. And that resonated with me, better than calling this one way. Jen referred to it this way, and it was helpful. And sure enough, Jake, earlier this week, I met with a young player who wants to do mindset work. And her theme was a very high level volleyball team, competitive volleyball team here in St. Louis, and doesn't know why they selected her, right? Doesn't feel good enough that she stepped up to a higher level, doesn't understand what they maybe see with her. And of course, that comes out in performance when we don't ourselves believe in our own superpowers. That we all have them. We all have, and I bet you have a ton of stories about athletes or coaches or mentoring ADs. Julie Foudy was on, you were on with me. Jen Brooks, who I know you've had on the podcast from St. Louis here, has the Global Women of in Sports. And Julie Foudy, another U.S. Women's National Team veteran, was asked, how do you feel when you're in a particular world now that you didn't grow up a broadcaster, along veteran broadcasters, and wondering how she felt about that. And she said, we have to remind ourselves that nobody else has our perspective in any moment. And that becomes valuable. So that's the thing I wanted to kind of bring up as my own lesson in the last few weeks, and something that I definitely want to bring into 2024 as hopefully more new, scary, uncomfortable things present themselves. And maybe for a quick second to remind myself that nobody else has your perspective. Nobody else has your style. And that can sometimes be just exactly what you need. You're enough.
No, and you and I talked about this before. I think it's important to, know your own worth, know your strengths, know your lane, etc. But you mentioned that the only time that we ever grow is when we get outside of that lane and we challenge ourselves. And it's interesting, that perspective is, you never know how your observation and sharing that observation is going to impact someone. And it's not a question of right, wrong, good or bad. It's just it's different. And hearing that different voice or hearing that different explanation can make all the difference in the world to somebody listening to you call a soccer game, or to, as you mentioned, just working with an athlete.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard for us then. And it reminds me of the team training sometimes that I do. There's in their third training, we have them go over, there's a book out there called Alter Ego. Kobe Bryant, the late Kobe Bryant, used an alter ego to perform. Many athletes and celebrities will use that kind of psychological phenomenon to kind of, put on a different personality, or put something on that they need for a performance. And people do it all the time. So it's something that we do. And do you know that sometimes there are athletes in that training that they will quickly fill out the box that says, list your weaknesses, right? List the things they know exactly. I'm sure your coaches and athletic directors know, like, I need to work on X, Y, and Z. But many of them are slow to fill up that box that says, what are my strengths? What are my superpowers? Well, I don't know. And we have this debate. It's, how can you bring that into your performance if you don't know what it is, whatever that might be? And so it's really important for, I think, and it applies to probably all of us. And Julie Foudy also said on that call that, with her perspective, she says, I hope that, I can help just one person be seen or heard, right? In that way, maybe just the way I say something, the way I do something, the way I relate it, whatever that might be. If one person, and we've all coached athletes, and there's big teams full of athletes, and sometimes we wonder, do we ever make an impression? And maybe sometimes it's the thing that we thought that wasn't very powerful, kind of, proverbially hit that player right between the eyes, and that's exactly what they needed in that moment. And it's an aha many times, as a former competitive athlete myself, youth athlete, that some of those lessons stay with you forever.
You made me think of a question. I know we try to avoid ambush journalism here, but
I'm
you know,
ready.
you're a pro. You work with teams, you work with individuals on, mental performance, mindset. I've heard this term lately, not so much from you, but I've heard this, and I don't like the term. I understand what they're trying to say, but it here's the term, in your working with teams and individuals, do you ever use the term imposter syndrome? Um, and here's why I don't like it. Certainly the condition that it describes exists. Okay. I'm not denying that. But it seems like by just using that term and saying it out loud, like he who must not be named, by saying it, you are um, giving credence to the negative. And, let's say, we want to, we want to increase their confidence or, focus on strength. What are your thoughts on my thoughts?
Yeah,
Am I
I
a
actually
dope here?
I love that you brought that up because imposter syndrome is currently being debated in the kind of the world of psychology. Does it really exist? Does it really, is it really a phenomenon? Is it more of a social construct? Is it something that is really there with deep within your psyche, or is it something that the way you've been brought up, right? That the way you the everything you've been around, for example, if you have a player who's only been focused on results and has never ever been celebrated in the process, right, to take a risk, you might have a player that develops and shows up kind of in that way. So the term is out there. Its opposite term, so that is kind of that lack of confidence because I don't think I'm good enough. I don't have enough. I compare myself to everybody else in that booth or whatever that might be and go, but this person knows this and this person knows that. I think the phenomenon, one way or the other, just like you said, is there. I think it's important. I actually do call it out in my training I usually get a lot of faces that are like, that's me, right? The opposite of that is called overconfidence or the Dunning-Kruger effect. And that's the ignorance is bliss cognitive
Mhm.
bias. So that is a really good, let's say a speedy athlete, right? Somebody who's just very fast thinks that everybody's just very fast, that why can't you run this as quickly? Because I can. Or sometimes they don't know enough to have a little bit of lack of confidence that they could use a little humility. That's a blessing and a curse at the same time. As imposter syndrome, those are sometimes the most humbling people to the most humble people to coach, because they want to soak up the information, they want to learn, or just us in our professional fields. But when it's time, right, when it's showtime, when it's game time, when the light goes on and the cameras or the whistle blows, that imposter syndrome, we need to fade away and to step into the power that is ours. So it's a great point, and I love that you brought it up because it's currently kind of being embattled now. That is it really a thing, or is it something that we just kind of grow up because of our environment that we're in?
All right. Well, another reason for our listeners to follow Jen Siess and Mind to Define because she's on that cutting edge of all things newsworthy. I know you're again incredibly busy, but I want you to talk about your podcast. Where did that come from? And it's
Oh
it's
my
doing
goodness.
great. And I think there's a million podcasts out there. I get it, but yours has a niche that I think is very much worth listening to. So share with our listeners. How did that all happen?
Yeah. So I'll say first how you find it, because if you try to find it the way my podcast is named, you probably won't. So just like yours, Jake, on any podcast streaming service, there's a podcast called the Soccer Dad Pod. And these are three guys, three dads who actually kind of position themselves as not knowing anything about soccer, but they do. They all played pretty high level, and their sons play for the MLS Academy team, right? So the youth levels in here in St. Louis, which is the first time we've ever had that. Pretty cool. And they've had over, just like yourself, over 100 episodes, and they've had on like Hall of Famers, some of the best names you've ever heard in soccer, as well as dads on a sideline that want to talk about their kids' experience. And they reached out, and I was on their main podcast, and then they said, we think that there's perspective that we're missing. And I told them, I know there's perspective you're missing. And so we kind of hashed it out, and mine drops every Sunday. It's called Soccer Mom Sunday. But again, it's hosted on the Soccer Dad Pod platform. And we've had, again, anywhere from national team players to college players to moms that, just like what we talked about today, Jake. I had a couple of moms on who maybe played high school soccer, but they are totally into their kids' experience and great people. And their first response to me when I ask is, why do you want me? Why do you want me on your podcast? And, when Kelly Nelson, who's a friend of mine who wouldn't consider herself somebody to be on, her podcast performs as well as U.S. men's national team former stud Marcelo Balboa. That tells you that the power of her perspective and the things that she talked about, with her three sons playing different levels in high school, relates to people. And so Soccer Mom Sunday drops every Sunday morning with the Soccer Dad pod, and it's been fun so far. And I have some fun surprises for 2024. I'm very excited.
Well, again, it's good to see you, join the podcast group. You've got a great, I think you undersold yourself a little bit. You got a great understanding of the game. You're also a professional, coach, communicator, and now, broadcaster. So, welcome to that podcast family. If one of our listeners wanted to reach out and connect with you, and listeners, you got a great resource here. Tell them, about the website and tell them how they can get in touch with you directly.
Yeah, so my website is www.mine to define. That's mine. Mine, like my kids are currently downstairs. They're home from Christmas, so they're fighting mine. Mine to define.com, or jen@mine to define.com for email. And of course on socials, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. I try, Jake. I try to keep up with all the posting. It's not my strength. But my teenager might start helping me with that, except she likes to put sparkles and glitter on all the things on Instagram, and I just can't do that.
No, I'm very proud of the way you've embraced social media, particularly with the podcast. So, again, we see you, we see what you're doing. Jen Siess,
Well, I've learned from the best, my friend.
oh my, hey, well, you would make a great athletic director because you're just like an AD. They see something that is good and they steal it. And athletic
That's
directors can't wait to share. Please come and steal
See,
our
that's
stuff.
a superpower.
As you got. No, you're doing great. Keep it up. Um, Thanks again for coming on. All the best with the rest of 2024. And thanks so much for being a part of our Wednesday Wisdom family.
Thank you so much.
For listeners, we certainly appreciate your support. And, we also upload the Zoom recordings to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. Thanks as always for listening. Come back next Wednesday for another great Wednesday Wisdom segment and just about every day for new content on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll see you next time. Hey, before we go, as always, we want to give a shout out to our sponsors. Once again, these are companies that I used as an athletic director. You should be using them too. We want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Go to athleticsurveys.com. See all the things that they can do for you and your program. I want to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com, schedule a live web demo to see their products in action. We want to say thank you to Home Campus. Home Campus is the exclusive high school and state association platform for us, something I used every day as an AD. Go to homecampus.com for more information. We want to thank Gipper, the official social media graphics solution for us. Go to Gipper.com, start creating world-class content. Gipper.com. We want to thank Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Mention the podcast, you'll get a nice discount. We'd like to thank Huddle. As a football coach, I used Huddle. As an AD, we were a Huddle school. Go to huddle.com to get started. If you're looking for an online fundraiser, stop. Go to snapraise.com. Snapraise.com, the best fundraiser out there. And we want to thank Hometown Ticketing. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Hometownticketing.com. Thanks again for listening. This was episode number 100 of Wednesday Wisdom. Please continue listening, and we'll see you next time on the Educational AD Podcast.